Afternoon, everyone. We've got a scary title for this presentation, and I'm obviously scary because no one's decided to sit at the front here, so I won't take it personally. But anyway, what we're going to talk about today is the findings from some research that we conducted last month, which was just over 1,000 employees, or sorry, 2,000 employees rather, talking about three main things. Firstly, how they interact with augmented and artificial intelligence in their daily lives. The second is looking at how that compares and contrasts with what they view their interactions with humans being like. And the third being, what does this mean for them? What does it mean for their outlook on the future of recruitment and the future of their job? But before I get into the research, I'll talk to you a little bit about, I guess, how read.co.uk links in with the subject that we're talking about at the moment. So, Read on the left-hand side, we, as a brand, were launched in 1960, the same decade that the first robot was used in the workplace, so our little arm thing there that's being represented. So the first robot was used in the 1960s. IBM launched the first typewriter with a QWERTY keyboard, like it still has now, in the 1960s. And then finally, some people who are around about my generation will recognize the things on the top right, which are cassette tapes. My children who will have no idea what these are, but they were, believe it or not, born in the 1960s as well. Fast forwarding on, when read.co.uk was launched in the 1990s, three quite big things happened. The first was Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet, so the World Wide Web and HTTP were created. Java was launched as the first official computer language. And the top right, one of the reasons why I didn't get a first at university, the Nintendo 64. So the fifth generation of consoles was launched in the 1990s. Those of you who remember GoldenEye, will remember what a magnificent game that was. But these are great times, in my view, and great times for the world at large. And then fast forwarding on today, read.co.uk is now a business which has 250,000 jobs on the site. You can interact with it if you're a recruiter through an app, if you're a job seeker through an app, through mobile, desktop, tablet, and so on. So our product has moved along quite a lot, as has technology market generally. We've got things on here which are represented in terms of artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, driverless cars that we've got here, and virtual reality. So the world has changed quite a lot in the 50 years that read.co.uk has been about, and certainly in the last 20 years we've seen an awful lot of technological advancements happen. And I guess the point around today, we live in a world now where technology has advanced enormously. There's a huge amount of unbelievable stuff going on. But this isn't kind of future, this is what's happening today. So I guess as a backdrop, a couple of examples here of what augmented reality and the changing nature of reality that we look at now. Here's one example. So through the lens of an augmented reality world, this is the sort of thing, if you were sitting in an auditorium, you would see a beautiful whale jumping up in front of you. That's what the world now looks like to some people with a very specific type of headset on. But that's the sort of thing that technology can do. Also in the workplace or at home, augmented reality, I'll talk over this, through something like the HoloLens, which is a Microsoft product, allowing you to overlay tasks, information, your work environment over a different environment, your home place, for example. So a really good example here about ways that technology can pull information from different sources into a normal 3D environment. So holograms, changing your field of vision, and actually ways that you can interact with it. This example here is this person's child giving them messages about the particular project they've got on. And some of the stuff here is crazy, but this is stuff which is happening now. This isn't the future. So this is what our workplaces could look like, who knows? Or if you're working from home, these are the sorts of ways that you can bring technology into your home. So I'll move on to the research. So the research was conducted, as I said, last month to just over 2,000 employees. And really what we want to try and look at was the ways that people of different demographics, regions, ages, job levels looked at the world of work and how things they thought were going to be changed in future based on technology. What I will say quickly, there's a shameless plug coming up. So this, as you know, is an Amazon Echo Dot, which is an example of the technological advancement. But we are giving a few of these away today. We've got 3 still available. My colleague Neil over there will hopefully, if we can do this well, and if you guys get involved, we can give one away at the end of this session. So if you can take any snaps of this piece of research that we're going through today, use the hashtag ReadRecTech on any social or professional networks that you might happen to be on at the moment, then it would be greatly appreciated. And one of you wonderful people might win one of these when you walk out of the room. Anyway, let's move on to the research itself. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was humans versus robot, this battle, this dynamic. So which one of these groups is going to win this battle? So a consumer's view. This is what how job seekers view automated services. I guess first off, though, is an example of where robots have taken place traditionally of what you would see humans doing. So on the left-hand side here is Inca. So Inca was a robot, as you can see, who was working between 2003 and 2015 at King's College London as a receptionist. So greeting people and using voice recognition to give an individual directions and information about the campus that they were walking around. And interesting enough, it was programmed by people, and over time they increased the quote-unquote sassiness of Inca to interact differently with people. It got to a point where obviously Inca had been done 12 years, which I guess in the world of work nowadays is quite a long stint in one job. So Inca moved on, and Kinber on the right-hand side was what replaced Inca, which is more kind of gender neutral, shall we say. It used different types of technology, not just to use speech recognition, but also to use facial recognition. So rather than just getting asked a question and answering the question back, Kinber works on so face recognition, so it understands people's emotions and will respond accordingly depending on what that person is discussing, looking like or feeling at that particular point. So receptionists are jobs which humans traditionally do, but King's College in London are a good example of an organisation who has taken this to the next step and is using technology to provide that service. So an example of where one could argue that humans are beating robots, robots are beating humans, who knows? But certainly in this particular reception at King's College, the robots are probably on a 1-0 victory at the moment. So we asked, related to this, we asked candidates whether they thought that interacting with humans or interacting with robots gave them a better experience. And the winners for us in this room was good, humans just. A good example of this is that one of the questions that we asked was if you were going into a supermarket and you had the choice between a manned or human manned checkout or a self-checkout, which one would you prefer? And 57% of people said they preferred a checkout where you could interact with a human being, which was interesting. One of the things which I guess we found particularly interesting was that there was a similar kind of split here with people who use other sort of self-service technology. So people who are going into airports, for example, 60% of people said they preferred a check-in desk that was manned by a human rather than a self-scan, which is quite interesting. Actually, up until last week, I would have put myself in that same category. However, a bit of a plug for EasyJet here. I went away for the weekend and used the self-scan, and it was a marvellous experience. So maybe I would be in the minority here. But people still prefer dealing with people. Although the balance is, it's moving towards halfway. In a couple of years' time, who knows how the balance would potentially be. The reasons that they gave why they preferred this type of interaction was potentially understandable, obviously. So people are more personable than robots. I think that's probably an obvious one, but people like the way that they can interact with human beings. They get a greater peace of mind speaking to a human. So maybe there's a level of trust here. They view that if they have a problem or something that needs to be solved, they have a greater likelihood of that problem being solved to their satisfaction if there's a human rather than a robot or an automated service providing this. And the last one is about more reliable. You can rely on humans to an extent not to have technical glitches which will cause them problems. In addition to these, they said there was less frustrations. Again, this comes back to the point of having a problem solved. 31% of people said that they thought they could experience a less frustrating experience through a human than they could through a technology. And actually also that the experience was more enjoyable. Almost a third of people said the experience of interacting with a person was more enjoyable than a self-checkout. So that's what they said. And in a way, you can kind of see why in this more reliable bit. A news clip. So this is a story that the Telegraph ran last year about this is in China at a technology event where a robot attacked a human. So it went rogue in this particular instance. So those of you who can't see, a robot on display at an exhibition in exhibition in China injured a passerby this week after attacking a display booth. Now, there is an underlying story here. It's not just, it's not sort of the first step towards what happens in Terminator, the robots attacking humans. This was actually apparently a human who had the joystick leant on forward and crashed it into someone. But obviously the headline is much more interesting if you said that a robot attacked a human. So we then looked at demographic information. So what do job seekers of different ages believe? And actually, really interestingly, going back to that point about checkouts, overwhelmingly, the younger generation, in inverted commas, preferred checkouts that were manned by people. So 72% said they preferred going to a supermarket or the airport and dealing with a human being rather than technology, whereas at the next generation up, the next tick box, 25 to 34 said that they are 60% preferred automated. So you've got this kind of quite interesting dynamic between the two. Younger people, who I would have expected to index much higher on the we prefer automation, actually preferred humans more than the next generation along. So quite interesting there. So moving on to another example of technology. So some of you might be familiar with this being here. This is a telenoid, and I guess this is our first foray into the world of artificial intelligence. So a telenoid is a piece of technology which is intended to replace a human on the end of the phone. So the idea here being that if I am making a phone call and someone is on the other end of the other side of the world on the other end of the phone, they can have a telenoid sat next to them who will mimic my facial expressions or my movements, and so it feels more like you're in the room. Now, I don't look quite like that, but the idea here is that actually you're trying to, there's a quizzical face there. Do I look like that? I don't know. But the idea here being that you're bringing something which is voice controlled into an environment here, and actually changing the nature of the interaction. So rather than being over the phone where you can't see or feel that person, if you're getting facial expressions across, you can start understanding emotion rather than just the voice. So it's quite interesting. Now obviously we do have things like FaceTime and Skype and other things which allow you to see someone, but this is a more of a physical manifestation of someone being with you. So this is all based on artificial intelligence bringing a different type of reality into your home in this instance. Anyway, that's a segue. So we talked to people about AI interaction. So really interestingly, 64% of people that we asked in this survey, so they said that they had used chatbots. So this is specifically, they understood they were interacting with a chatbot. So this is online. It could be using a help center or on a website that they're on. So 64% said that they knew they were dealing with a chatbot. 31% of people said that they have used an online chat function, but they weren't sure whether it was a real human or a chatbot at the other end. So people understand that chatbots exist. People understand that artificial intelligence can help them in an online interaction. They can give them a really good service. But in this instance, 2/3 of people said that they understood and appreciated and in a way kind of enjoyed the fact that they were dealing with technology. This is starting to become more and more key to day-to-day life. So if you're on Facebook or many other sites, you're aware of the fact that the information you're being given is based on artificial intelligence. Those sites understanding the sort of information or content that you're looking to or interested in receiving, and they will give you information accordingly. Chatbots are another way of giving you information based on the likely required response for that question. So a good example bringing this into the recruitment world is this. This is Sky Bet's chatbot, which is Jeff. So those of you who have Sky Sports, Jeff Stelling is the presenter on Sky Sports, and Jeff has been created as a chatbot. So what's really interesting here is this is Sky Bet's careers page. So this is a chatbot on a careers site, and the aim of which is to allow a person to ask Jeff questions about kind of life at Sky Bet, the sort of jobs they might be interested in, and Jeff will funnel that person towards jobs or information about jobs which are relevant to them. So that's bringing artificial intelligence into the recruitment world. So this is very specifically a recruitment site. So it's quite interesting. So again, we're used to, as a consumer, interacting with chatbots in this way, and this is a careers portal who's bringing that to life. Actually, at read.co.uk, we've seen, obviously we're aware of the increase in chatbots, and we've recently launched one ourselves for exactly that reason. So we have people coming to our Facebook page, interacting with the chatbot to ask them information about jobs which they might be interested in applying for. So Skybet are obviously interested in getting you to channel your activity towards a job at Skybet. We're kind of answering questions and helping people understand the sorts of roles which would be interesting to them, or funneling them towards careers information. So it's certainly something which we've recently launched, and I'm sure over time we will see more interaction with. So chatbots are, well, very much in the consciousness of people. Now, what I would say, there is a kind of cautionary tale that's just about to come up. So I know at the event today, there are a couple of people from Microsoft who are attending. Are any of them in the room now? Okay, good. So the next slide is a comment on a chatbot that Microsoft created, rather than being a comment on Microsoft. Let me make that very clear. So Microsoft launched something last year called Tay, which was a Microsoft chatbot. Now, the comment here is the fact that people do understand they're dealing with chatbots, and people understand how to manipulate chatbots. So people who are dealing in social media spheres all the time understand that by asking chatbots in particular questions, or you can kind of coach them to behave in a certain way. And this was a really interesting one. So Microsoft launched this, and within 24 hours, Tay was, how should we say, well, the headline says it all, saying racist, sort of misogynistic, politically incorrect comments here, and purely not because of that's what Tay believed or that's what Microsoft wanted to happen, but purely because the people who were on Twitter knew that we could have some fun here. So that's what they managed to do, kind of manipulate and coach the technology to do something which absolutely Microsoft did not intend this to be created for. So it's a cautionary tale. So chatbots are important, but I guess the technology needs to be used in such a way that it can understand when it's been manipulated, I guess, which is a human characteristic which I guess we have, which artificial intelligence doesn't. Okay, so we asked our job seekers which jobs they felt UK workers were most at risk from a UK worker's perspective. So first of all, 61% of candidates that we asked agreed that kind of computers, automation, or robots will take the jobs of humans. So that's not their particular job, that's just jobs as a whole. So 61% believe that was the case. 11% said they disagreed with that. 11% said, we don't think that will happen. Okay, so you've got an overwhelming majority who say they might do or they definitely will do here. So I guess we understand that technology will have an impact in our jobs. The jobs they said were most at risk are these. So factory workers, receptionists, telemarketers, customer service, librarians. Now, lots has been written over the last couple of years. You're quite right to say there's this kind of ongoing social media conversation about this subject, but the tasks, in inverted commas, which people believe will be most easily automated are, in a lot of instances, low-level, repetitive tasks. So I think it's interesting as factory workers being one that's kind of highlighted here. So I'll give you an example here. Now, I must kind of reference this. So we had an event at read.co.uk recently where Jeremy White, who's the product editor of Wired magazine, joined us, and he kind of showed us a few examples here. And this is an example which he showed us, which is a company called Boston Dynamics. And this is a piece of technology that they have created. I'll sort of talk over the top of it. But it's technology which they have built to move and behave like humans or animals. That's essentially. So it's kind of it's a laboratory which has been spun out of MIT, so one of the world's most prestigious technology universities. So this is one of the Boston Dynamics creations. So not many people in a workplace setting will be doing some of the things you'll see here. I think it spins around in a second, does a little dance here. Now this isn't obviously what we're suggesting will be used in a workplace environment, but the next one we'll move on to, potentially in a factory, how they could use this technology potentially to avoid obstacles without dropping things, or I guess do some sort of interesting lunges. The next one, sorry, is around lifting heavy objects. So where you've got tasks which are repetitive, which actually could, from a health and safety perspective, could be something which is challenging for a human. You can get, so it's 100 pounds this robot is picking up, and it can go much higher than that. So there are tasks here which this robot or others can perform, which humans might find challenging, or you might just want to take off the table from humans. So interesting enough, 35% of people that we asked, they thought that manufacturing jobs would be replaced by 2022. So manufacturing is one of the sectors which they said is most likely to be hit by this sort of advancement in technology. So that's just in case a factory worker needs to leap over something while it's moving along. But you kind of get the point here. There is technology which is allowing businesses to advance. Okay. Another example is this. This is SoftBank. So SoftBank have this customer service representative called Pepper. So this is moving into the customer services realm. So rather than having a human who can help you from a customer service perspective, give you advice, point you in the right direction, Pepper is allowing you to do it. So Pepper is, there's some quite astonishing statistics. There was a huge improvement in productivity in sales where Pepper was involved in these particular sites. Pepper is now, people in China can now buy Pepper to kind of move into their home. Interesting enough. So in the workplace, this is being used to replace customer services agents. It's now moving into the human consciousness at home. But really interesting that actually businesses are adopting this sort of thing more and more often to replace things that humans might do. Now, that said, there are obviously aims or roles which people say the human touch is required. Doctors, vets, chefs, scientists, social workers. So perhaps unsurprising that where you need human interaction, you need the human touch. Or in lots of people's view, decisions that technology will simply not be able to achieve as effectively as humans. So I would probably, at the moment, I went to see a doctor rather than relied on some kind of chatbot to tell me what was wrong with me. But it's really interesting that kind of there is still obviously this core of jobs which are going to be forever reliant on human beings. So we asked people about their personal job. What do they think, how at risk do they think their jobs are at the moment? So half of the people that we asked, so 1,000 people, said that they felt that their job could be replaced in the next 10 years. So 50% said they did, 50% said they didn't. 1 in 10 people said they were very concerned, so they were kind of gravely concerned that their job was going to be taken by some technology. Now, interesting enough, the group that indexed quite high, or most highly, were people who were in senior management positions. So those at a higher level of business feared their job was going to be replaced more than people lower down the food chain, shall we say. However, I guess indexing against the half, 37% of C-suite people said they were very concerned. So, there's still a large proportion of people at exec level. Only 62% of business owners said they thought they were going to be replaced, because ultimately I think they're the people who would make the decision about replacing themselves. So maybe that's not that surprising. So a third of people said that they didn't think they were at risk because they had specialist skills that simply couldn't be replaced by technology. And actually, one of the talks earlier on talked about creativity. One of the things which technology at the moment, potentially in a lot of people's eyes, isn't demonstrating it can replace is creativity. And as I mentioned, the need to make important decisions. But I think overwhelmingly there was a fairly broad brush sweep to say that people understand that technology will impact them. A lot of people also said that they think that there can be a fantastic working relationship between humans and technology. So this isn't all doom and gloom, it's not fear here. But actually people are saying there are things which actually can help us. As a human, I can be helped by robotics or by AI because processes can become quicker. You can automate certain parts of the process to make end-to-end processes better. And certainly from a recruitment perspective, I think that's very, very, very achievable. Menial tasks are easy to manage, fewer errors are made. If you can put, if a robot can undertake a task with 100% opportunity to complete it successfully, why wouldn't you automate that? It will also give people more time to focus on complex tasks, and it can give better thought out decisions. That kind of emotion that you don't get from artificial intelligence. I think it's important for people to still have an involvement there. So I guess moving on, what does the future look like? So the majority believe that robots, automation or AI will account for 20 to 40% of the workplace in 10 years' time. So people understand that a large proportion of the workplace is going to be replaced by technology within a relatively short period of time. And I guess a good example of this is this example here. So this is a Chinese factory. So this particular factory has replaced 90% of its workforce with robots. So production has risen by 250%. Defects have dropped by 80%. So they're churning out more product. It is of a much higher quality. There are less errors, less issues. And that's largely based on the fact that they are getting robots to do it rather than humans. Interesting enough, so this factory used to be run by 650 employees. It's now run by 60. And the general manager thinks they can get that down to 20. So from 650 people, they reckon they can get it down to 20 people in a relatively short period of time. So this is a living, breathing example of where automation is taking over. So it's not just about manufacturing. So labour productivity is believed to increase by about 40% across all sectors. So the Accenture and Frontier forecast here talks a lot about opportunities to improve productivity by increasing automation. So this is removing, again, menial tasks, things that can be automated, reduce errors. Okay, so less errors means less tasks that have to be repeated, which means greater productivity. So there's an awful lot here to say that actually the future is brighter potentially if we include automation here. And 30% of people believe that advancement of technology will be the biggest driver. 30% of people believe that advancement technology will be the biggest driver of change in their industry. So globalization is nowhere near. Increased competition is nowhere near. Technology is the thing that are driving people forward. And I guess more related to you guys, recruitment professionals. So 40% believe that technology is the thing which will help them advance their industry more than any other. Again, more than globalization or increased competition. Some of you in this room might debate that. You might not yet have the tools at your disposal. You might need increased budgets to be able to do this, but there are obviously clearly opportunities here to increase the quality of what we are doing. So I guess a quick word of warning here. We've talked about AI. There's an example here, and I won't go into all of the details, but the FT ran a report here about a piece of research which an academic had run, which looked at just over 400,000 applications for jobs. And the idea was to remove the human bias. Let's have a look at this 400,000 applications and see whether we can remove bias and change the outcome. Now, interestingly enough, this was sort of 70 to 80% accurate. So this was not looking at the end result, this was looking at all of the inputs, the CVs, the candidate, the quality, the background, the demographic, 70 to 80% match. Now, what we would say here, however, is that that obviously in itself is biased. They're looking at historic information to kind of predict the future. So there is a cautionary tale here. If people are using artificial intelligence and information to have a look at what's happening in the future, you do have to bear in mind that if you're only ever looking backwards or using information from the past, the future's not going to change. So I guess there's a cautionary tale here about you have to build into artificial intelligence kind of other nuances in terms of what might happen in future. So, finally, we also asked our job seekers, but also a bit of crowdsourcing, a bit of internet research, looking at what's going on out there to see what's going to happen in future. So, 55% of people that we asked in the survey said that they are likely to develop new skills in future to kind of help them in their career. So they understand that technology is changing, what they're going to have to do in a day-to-day life at work is different. So 55% of people believe that they will need to upskill. And 10% of people saying, I'm already upskilling because I know my job will change in future. So that's quite interesting. So people understand that they're going to have to change. And there's some examples of job titles in the future. So some of this is guesstimation, some of this is hyperbole. But these are some examples. We know that the workplace is changing, we know technology is changing, so here are some examples of things that you might see in future. So in healthcare and science, DNA editors, so looking at genetic engineering, will there be jobs for people who can create new genetic entities? Remote healthcare specialists, things like Fitbit are already tracking our heart rate, they're looking at how active we are, so will there be jobs for people in future who can help us remotely? Neurotechnology is changing, neuroimplant technicians, and human designers, again, genetic engineering will get people helping us design new humans in future. From a technology perspective, virtual reality, smart home, handy people. So this isn't people who are going to come in and change your traditional thermostat. This is more about looking at Hive and other technologies. Computer personality designing. If we're bringing those two robots that we saw earlier on and we want to give them personalities, we might want to create technology to do that. And a 3D printer design artist, an interesting one for those of us who are excited by the prospect of what 3D printers can do. Also with an aging population, some quite somber ideas here. End-of-life planners, octogenarian service providers. So with an aging population, more services, more technology-based services for the older generations. And finally, the environment. So things like urban farmers, which, we've built over green belt. There's bigger cities than ever. We're having to build higher. So how can we get people to farm in smaller urban environments? Rewilding strategies. How can we make urban environments more green? Atmospheric water harvesters. How can we, if the water's running out, how can we use the clouds? And I don't mean the technological cloud. I mean the actual clouds to kind of harvest water. So there's lots of things which our jobs could change into in the future. So I've gone over time and I apologise profusely for that. In conclusion, okay, so our job seekers understand that our robots can be our friends. This isn't necessarily a war. We can work harmoniously together. They will make our working life easier. There is a concern about impact on society. We do have a workplace that is prepared to adapt, so people understand technology will impact them, so they're willing to change and upskill themselves. But in some instances, we will still need the human touch, so your doctor still has a job for the time being. Thanks very much for listening.